The Pelicans finally fired head coach Willie Green, but if you listen to Joe Dumars' press conference, you'd swear the real problem is even higher up. His comments were concerning, to put it lightly. Let's talk about what he really revealed about how he's running this team. It's a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all on this Sunday. It's another bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans because I was at Joe Dumars' I was on the Zoom call for the Joe Dumars press conference yesterday. And he said something that made me really concerned about the direction or where this team could head. But I also want to do this show, not just to react to that, to look at James Borrego. And then because there is a game tonight, Sunday, I want to just evaluate that game on what we're going to see from it on the Monday episode of Locked On Pelicans, because from what I've been told, it's going to be pretty different. We're going to cover it all in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans, and I'm going to give you the Joe Dumars quote that I find so concerning. Today's episode is brought to you by is brought to you by Game Time. There we go. FanDuel is another sponsor. But today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the number one Pelicans podcast covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join us on YouTube or the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, the number one sports podcast network. So let's get into this quote from Joe Dumars. Dumars spoke to media yesterday after firing head coach Willie Green, and he answered a number of questions. But I want to focus on one answer that I find particularly concerning. When asked why he kept head coach Willie Green and started the season with him, this is the quote. Quote, I'd seen some... Let me start fresh here because this quote frustrates me. Quote, I'd seen some of the Pelicans when they were fully healthy a few years ago, and it seemed that Willie was doing a good job. I thought it was only fair to give him an opportunity going forward. As I said to Willie when I got here, I was like, Willie, look, I do not have someone in the wings waiting. You're the guy that I'm committing to do this. I'm all in with you, and let's move forward and try and turn this thing around into something great. And so it was just as simple as he's been here. Give him a chance to get a fresh start with me and go forward and build. End quote. Two things from this, because if it's the meme from what the movie Clue, the flames coming out the side of my head. Two things from this. Quote, it was as simple as he's been here. End quote. What? Just what? Look, this is not Willie Green being the first or second year as a head coach where you want to give them some time. This is someone who was in year 5. You just can't ignore previous years, previous data points, or previous seasons where he's been a coach. To say, you just can't ignore that. In the same sentence, in the same answer, he says, quote, I'd seen some of the Pelicans when they were fully healthy a year ago, quote, end quote. Did he just not look at basically anything before he came in? How can you ignore that? To just say, I've seen some of the Pelicans. You should have almost looked at every single game of the Pelicans as you were evaluating this organization. You can't just ignore 4 years of what we have seen here. That's mind-blowing to me. And maybe he misspoke in this press conference, but to say, I'd seen some of the Pelicans comes off as half-assed, nonchalant, something like that. That is not acceptable when you're running a team. And maybe I'm nitpicking a little bit here, but you should have all of the data points. It shouldn't just be, well, he's here and I want to give him a fresh shake. No. Use the data that you have available to you. In the same answer he stated, quote, we started losing the same way over and over and over again, end quote. It's not that they were losing the same way this season. This has been the case for years now. This has been the case for the times when he'd seen some of the Pelicans when they won 49 games. They didn't have a single fourth quarter comeback that season. Third quarters for years have been a massive issue. Questionable decisions to stick with certain guys who were not better than younger guys behind them. I'm looking at the Kevon Looney example this year. All of this has been a trend with head coach Willie Green. This has been the frustration of fans. This has been things that I pointed out over the years here on Locked On Pelicans. Everybody could have seen it coming this way. So to get 12 games into the season and you make that determination now, you've ignored other stuff. You've wasted this year because of a lack of work you did or didn't do is mind-blowing to me when it comes to all of this. He says, in talking about Willie Green and why he made the decision to make this change, he spoke a lot about identity and a lack of competitiveness. Quote, "I did not see us establishing anything in terms of an identity of who we're going to be. That more than anything else is why," end quote, he let Willie Green go. What in the previous 4+ years made anyone think this team was going to do that? To think that it was just going to magically change in year 5 is, I struggle with this answer. I truthfully do. It almost screams malpractice to me. You can't ignore the previous 4 years of what your head coach had been doing, of what a player had been doing. Yeah, you want to have somewhat of a fresh start with guys and make your own determinations, but you also do need to actually look at the past results because those matter here. And look, maybe Joe Dumars is covering for ownership. Maybe Gayle Benson didn't want Willie Green fired. It had been reported that David Griffin wanted to fire him. She said no. That led to partially David Griffin leaving the team and being fired himself. There's been a reported fondness for him from ownership from Gayle Benson. Sure. But if you're Joe Dumars and you are covering from ownership, this doesn't make me feel better about him running the team. You shouldn't take this job unless you have complete control. Gayle Benson gave the interview with NOLA.com and Jeff Duncan, and I've heard some of the backstory about how that got set up. Questions were not fed to her ahead of time or anything like that. She gave answers. It might have been well prepared, but she gave answers to questions that were asked in the moment. In that interview, she said it was up to Joe Dumars on head coach Willie Green and to make decisions. Whether that's true or not, it's the decision-making process above Willie Green that is so concerning. That is why we've said, I don't know if firing Willie Green is going to actually do much. You do need to do it to send the message, but I don't think it's going to make you a better team overnight. But we'll look at the changes to expect with James Borrego coming up on the next segment here. And I do think you will see some actual big ones. But this just speaks to a very broken decision-making process with this team. It goes to the trade on draft night for Derik Queen. Derik Queen can be a good player, but the process to get him can be flawed. And it was here. And that likely means that when you make future decisions, you might not get as lucky and hit on Derik Queen again, or a Derik Queen type of player, or have that outcome again. To basically say, I watched some of the Pelicans before, but I haven't watched all of them, so I don't really know what was going on, blows my mind. In this interview, he said he did not talk to the players about head coach Willie Green. For someone who says he wants to talk to people and get their opinions, to not kind of get that input during the season about how things were going when you could visibly see a team that quit out there on the court is frankly concerning to me. That game against the Lakers, the body language was by far the worst I have ever seen. And it just wasn't going well here. And so to waste time to make these decisions, that's what bothers me so much about all of this. We'll talk a little bit about it with James Borrego in the next segment here. You could have done this 2 games ago and saved people some time and actually gotten yourself in a better position, but you didn't for whatever reason. I don't think it's that Gayle Benson gave that interview that came out on Friday. So that interview was done on Thursday or Friday or in the morning, one of those 2 times. And then all of a sudden, Joe Dumars is like, cool, I can fire Willie Green, or Gayle Benson gave him the green light then. I don't think it was exactly like that. I think it just got to a point where it was untenable and this decision had to be made. So it's a mess here, and this gives me just very big pause, right? The whole hire of Joe Dumars was half-assed, was done in a lackadaisical, lazy manner. And it seems like they're still making decisions in a lazy manner, in a way that is not have anything to do with actual data or rooted in what you're seeing or learning from this team on the court. And it's like they've ignored the past 4 years. I hate that. Makes me concerned about this team going forward. I am excited for James Borrego. Let's get into what we heard from him and what to expect in tonight's game coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Robinhood. Your ambition just met its match with Robinhood. You play for the win, not just on game day, every day, locking in on every opening, beating your personal records, beating it again. Channel that drive into your money. Robinhood puts you in control of your money. Trade stocks and EFTs, options, futures, and crypto all in one platform. You can now build and execute your own trades from a desktop with Robinhood Legends advanced tools, or take advantage of the new Robinhood strategies with a tailored portfolio managed by a team of experts. You expect more from yourself. Expect more from your money. Get started today at Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Again, that's Robinhood.com/yourmoney. Your money, your move. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. Basketball season is officially here, and it's exciting. It's going to be an exciting new time in the Smoothie King Center, watching these Pelicans play with violence and speed. That's a phrase I'm going to use in the next segment here. So get in there, but getting tickets can be a pain. Between waiting in queues, surprise fees, prices that jump right before checkout, it's easy to get frustrated when all you want to do is cheer on your team. So that's where Game Time comes in. It's the app that gives fans the advantage. This is my go-to ticketing app. I'm getting married this week, on Saturday actually. A couple people are going to be here on Sunday. On Wednesday. We're all going to go to the game as fans. I needed a group of tickets. I got them on Game Time because the prices were great. We got the seats that we want all together. It's going to be a lot of fun. So when people want Pelicans tickets, I can't get them for you. I just tell you to go to Game Time and buy them that way. I love that what you see is what you pay. No hidden fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. That's code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go with Game Time. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. I got it right there. And watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network, same place you watch your Pelicans play. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and now the #1 sports podcast network. Programming note, I will not be on the show next week. I'm getting married, going on my honeymoon, taking a couple of weeks off. I'm glad this news got done so I could deliver you these shows and share my thoughts with y'all. Dylan Sanders, who you've seen on the show, he flew solo on Friday as well, is going to be taking over for that time. I will be back starting on December 15th, so I won't be gone that long. I'll be excited to come back with y'all. I'm going to feel refreshed. Maybe the team will be winning. It's going to be a lot of fun, but enjoy Dylan while I'm gone. He'll still be a regular on the show as well when I return, but I want to make sure y'all know that programming note is here. Final game that I'll be covering is going to be the Wednesday game. They play Friday night, so what would be the Monday show. So that's kind of the last game that I'll really be covering for everything here. Might go to the game on Monday, though. We'll see. The Bulls game on Monday. So let's get into James Borrego here, the interim head coach for this team. And he spoke to the media after practice on Saturday. You know, I'll share some inside information. I talked to a number of people around the team with the team, and I can tell you that practice felt very different under James Borrego. The whole vibe of the building felt very different. Talking to people at the game on Friday before the Lakers game, people with the team, you know, there was just a feeling of like waiting for the other shoe to drop, waiting for the axe to fall. That feeling being around the building like permeates everything and weighs on everybody. They felt miserable. There was a dark cloud hanging over this organization. You know, whether that's Willie Green's fault or other people's fault, it doesn't matter. It just exists. This happened right before Dell Demps was fired too. Like everyone just kind of knew it was coming after the Anthony Davis trade request, and it just made everybody feel miserable. And then when he was fired, even whether you like Dell Demps or not, it just lightened everything in the building, and it just added some much needed like joy, happiness back to what everybody was doing. Similar situation here. Whether you think Willie Green was actually the problem or not, or if it's Joe Dumars, if it's ownership, the fact that this was inevitably going to happen and needed to happen and finally has happened has made people just feel different. And I think that's an important thing. The vibes in practice, from what I were told, were very, very different, very, very good. And James Borrego, you know, in his first answer to a question as head coach of the Pelicans, you know, when it was like, what are you focusing on? It wasn't X's and O's. It wasn't offense. It wasn't defense. It wasn't rotations. It was get this team's heads up, he said. Get their spirits up and kind of change the vibe around them. I will repeatedly say this. That body language against the Lakers was atrocious. Trey Murphy was visibly frustrated from the start of that game. He was inbounding the ball at one point. Jose Alvarez was inbounding it to Jose, and Jose could see something was wrong and went over to like dap up Trey and be like, "Yeah, right? Like, come on, man." Like, you could see some of the players drawing at one another. They were not on the same page. It devolved into just kind of hero isolation ball because no one seemed to kind of have any faith or trust in one another. That's what was brewing around this whole organization as this team quit on head coach Willie Green. So getting their spirits up, getting their heads up, and just kind of changing the mentality around the squad right now should be Borrego's first order of, first action as head coach. And I'm glad that he understands that and is doing that right now. That's encouraging for being able to turn this season around, a theme that they really feel they can do. You can get into the play-in tournament potentially with a losing record. It might not be easy, but they did this Trey Murphy's rookie year. He was out there in media availability after practice saying, "Don't give up on us." Borrego said there's a lot of basketball left to be played. There's 70 games left to be played. You can turn things around, and we've all felt there's enough talent on this roster to at least be competitive. And I think that's still going to be their goal. Borrego is here to kind of settle things down. And in his availability, Joe Dumars said, we're going to probably ride with Borrego the rest of the season. So don't expect someone like Michael Malone or Taylor Jenkins, who's these free agent coaches. And we'll look at a list of potential coaches in the next segment here. Don't expect any of them to be hired immediately, a la like what happened with Doc Rivers a year or so ago. Borrego has been around this team for 3 years. These players have a level of trust with him. This means you can kind of hit the ground running a little bit quicker with some of what you want to do. And I do think that is important. When you look at the Western Conference for that kind of comeback, right? Portland is 6-6. That's 500 basketball in the 9th seed. Utah's 4-8 in the 10th spot right now. You could potentially get into the play-in tournament. I'm not saying the actual playoffs, but play-in tournament under 500. That's very much on the table in the moment here. So they can turn things around, and having someone that knows these guys that they are willing to listen to right away, I think is an important thing. So elevating Borrego settles things down a little bit, but it's going to hit a bit of a rough patch, I think. There's going to be some experimentation as Borrego does things very differently. I would not expect Kevon Looney to really play in this game tonight. It could be wrong, but this is kind of what I've been told, that I think you're going to see a whole shift in some of these rotations and how guys are used. And Borrego even said that right now. They need to spend some time to really see what works and what doesn't and be consistent in some of the rotations that he wants to use, but also be willing to move off of things that don't work. So there is going to be some adaptation and experimentation. And Borrego said the bigs are where he's going to likely lean into that the most. So I see this as a state of flux right now for New Orleans. He specifically mentioned Derik Queen and Zion Williamson have looked good together. It's limited possessions, 77 possessions total. I looked up the numbers, but they're almost a plus 15. They're a little bit over a plus 15 together on the court. They want to try that a little bit. This is also why waiting to fire head coach Willie Green was so dumb. Going back to what we said in the last segment here, this is 2 less games to figure out some of this experimentation and figure out what works and what doesn't. 2 games might not sound like much, but I'd rather have 2 more games of figuring things out than not right now. And, I think one of the goals here is for this team to kind of morph into a competitive squad. It's going to take a little bit to get there under head coach James Borrego. Who knows about the playoffs, but I think their goal right now is at the end of the year to be a competitive team and to be a team that the city is proud of. And they have not been a team for fans to be proud of thus far this season. So I think you will see them get there or work towards getting there eventually, but I wouldn't expect that in game 1, 2, or 3 or under Borrego, which is why you should have done this sooner. I do think you'll see a very different offense, a lot more sharing of the ball, more fluidity to the movement. James Borrego has a saying that he seems very fond of, and that is playing with speed and violence. And he's going to have the full support of the front office. From Joe Dumars, quote, "I sat in my office this morning and I said to him, James Borrego, I'm going to support whatever you want to do. Like, it's your call. I'm not the coach. I'm never going to be the coach. I never want to be the coach. It's your call, James. So however you want to go with this, I'm going to support you 100%. Borrego is given full autonomy right now. He's been empowered to just be the head coach. I think you'll start to see him figure some things out over the next 5 to 10 games. So it puts us around 25 games or so, a little bit less than that into the season, let's say. And I think at that mark, they'll start to have an idea of what's working and what isn't, and will be much more consistent going forward with all of that. And we'll see. This is his chance to audition. This is his chance to kind of earn this job. Should have done it sooner. This is where we are now. We'll start to evaluate it based off that going forward. It's, again, why I wanted to do this show now, get this stuff out of the way, so that tomorrow's show, back to regularly scheduled programming, we can really focus on this game against Golden State, what we saw, what we didn't, what worked, what didn't, from head coach James Borrego. But maybe he won't be the guy long term. There's some big name coaches out there in Michael Malone, Taylor Jenkins. We've already seen another name linked to this job, and I'm going to tell you, don't worry about that. I'm going to give you a list of candidates to keep an eye on and start learning more about, and we'll, of course, cover here on Locked On Pelicans. That's coming up here next in a bonus episode of Locked On Pelicans. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So even if you missed the start of the game, maybe you just haven't been paying attention to the Pelicans because, FanDuel has live bets if you missed the start on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. You can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a bigger payout. Pelicans are underdogs by 7.5 points looking at it going into this game. Do they get that interim head coach bump? Should it be less than that? Who knows? But you could get in on the action over at FanDuel. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. That is FanDuel.com. New customers get $300 in bonus bets. Best offer I've ever seen. And FanDuel's been with us for a while. When your first $5 bet wins over at FanDuel.com. All right, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Join over 12,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube as well. Watch us on the Gulf Coast Sports and Entertainment Network. I will still be with y'all this whole week. Then next week, taking a bit of a break. But I'll be back December 15th here. So rock with Dylan Sanders for a little bit, but I appreciate you making Locked On Pelicans part of your day. If you're an everydayer, let me know in the comments down below. So let's wrap up the show looking at some candidates. Borrego is obviously a name that is going to be in the mix for this. This is someone who has come close to head coaching jobs recently. They think very highly of, and he seems excited to coach this team. Definitely won the first press conference that he gave. There's Michael Malone out there as well. I don't need to really list his list of accomplishments. He's considered one of the better coaches in the league. Won a title with the Denver Nuggets. He's going to be expensive, though. And you have to imagine this team that acts cheap at times. Are they going to shell out $10 to $12 million for an NBA head coach? And I just don't see that happening. And also, when you look at some of the decision-making process here, do they want to step into this? The answer might be no. Same for Taylor Jenkins, who was a great coach with the Memphis Grizzlies. Both those guys will be head coaches again. But you can get into some lesser-known names. We saw Kevon Looney's name get linked to this team. I have zero interest in him as a head coach at all. None at all. Don't want him in the slightest here. They also have not started compiling a list of names. No list of names has leaked. I don't know how Kevon Looney's name is even linked to this team. I don't think there's any truth to that, at least right now. They fired head coach Willie Green yesterday. They elevated Borrego. They're not reaching out to anybody just yet. These people are also under contract elsewhere, and you can't do that in the moment. So don't really believe any names that are linked to the team just yet. I think they need a day or two to kind of get things settled before you even start looking at a short list here. But his name will probably come up. So will other names. Tom Thibodeau is a former head coach who makes sense from an identity perspective, something that Joe Dumars said. They want to build an identity. They need to build an identity. Tom Thibodeau's teams have an identity. Whether they work long-term or not, he very much fits that if you're looking for somebody to build an identity. And then it gets into some interesting assistant coaching names. Sam Cassell, a former player, currently a Boston assistant head coach, been with the Clippers and 76ers before. He's someone who usually gets votes as like best assistant in the NBA. I like NBA coaches that do have former playing experience. I think that helps them connect with players really well. Sam Cassell would be at the top of my personal list if you're looking for first-time head coaches. He's someone that or first-time NBA head coaches. That's important in a second here. He's someone I very much would like them to look at, and I think he could be. I think he's going to be a really good NBA head coach in the future. Chris Quinn is an assistant with the Miami Heat. He's been there since 2014. They have a culture. They have an identity. Heat culture is very much a thing. It's on the jersey. It's on the court. I don't think you could just copy and paste that here in New Orleans, but if you're looking for someone who has experience being around that type of stuff, Chris Quinn is a guy that has been a long-time assistant there, could easily step in and do his best to replicate some of that here in New Orleans. Royal Ivey is someone with the Houston Rockets, who's an up-and-coming name. He's also the head coach of South Sudan in their national team, working under Ime Udoka, who definitely has developed a strong culture and identity with the teams that he has coached. That is a name that I would expect to be on these lists as well. Mike Inori, current Timberwolves assistant, known as a bit of an offensive genius here at times. He's someone who is seen as an up-and-coming head coach as well that could make sense for this team if they want to kind of build a more offensive-based identity that has a lot of fluidity to it. Learning under former Pelicans assistant Chris Finch. Mike Inori is someone who's thought of very highly around the league. I think he's going to start getting interviews. He has been getting interviews. I would expect they will look at him in New Orleans. Another name that I want to throw out there too is Will Weaver. He was linked to getting this head coaching job when Stan Van Gundy was hired here. He's a former head coach of the Sydney Kings. He's been around the NBA. He's currently, with the Charlotte Hornets here. He's thought of as just one of the, a Mark Daigneault, one of those kind of young up and coming guys who are just very, very smart, know what they're doing. Keep an eye on that. But I also think Michael Malone, Taylor Jenkins, Tom Thibodeau as former NBA head coaches also are going to be in the mix here too. As will Borrego. Borrego's, got the inside track on a lot of this, being able to coach the team right now. We'll cover those names, look at their pros and cons, have some interviews around them in the future here, but I wanted to get this show out. Still concerned about the team even after the change. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. This is the Locked On Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. See y'all later tonight, tomorrow.